Welcome to the next module in this series of entrepreneurial lectures. I want to talk to you today about how organizations grow, and I want to share with you some established principles which we call the 5 phases of organizations' growth. We owe a lot of credit to the original work of Larry Grenier, who really talked about this many years ago and typified our organizational thinking on this matter. There are 5 phases. The first is one of creativity. We'll talk about that. The second is direction. The third phase is delegation. The fourth is coordination. And the fifth is collaboration. And as you can see, these phases grow over time. But at moving from one phase to another, or the transition, only occurs when there is a crisis of sorts. And so in thinking about these phases as the organization grows over time, the evolution of the organization as it matures and as ages creates challenges that must be met as you move from one phase to another. But what we're going to talk about today is each phase and then the crisis that's associated, or the challenge that's associated with moving from one phase to another. Phase 1, at the inception of the organization, the startup, is full of creativity. The founders are excited about what they're doing, and the focus is trying to make and produce a product or a service that some set of customers would be interested in. There's a lot of excitement in this piece, in this particular time, and individuals are working very, very hard to make that happen. But at some point, as they begin to get successful and begin to get traction in the organizations, confusion can set in. Individuals may not sure of exactly what they're trying to do, and the informal structure of the organization can in itself, which was beautiful and successful in the creative process, can create now some disorientation and perplexion among management. The antidote to dealing with the crisis in leadership is to moving to the second phase, is to be more directive. So direction sets in. Order, if you will, is what is asked for. The organization tries to structure it itself so it can, in fact, meet in a more systematic way, get information systems in place to more formalize and professionalize the organization's ability to grow over time and continue in this maturation process. Direction, of course, has its costs, and then a portion of that cost is that over time, the structure can be restrictive. Reporting systems, control systems begin to come into place as well. And so those that are caught in this web, in some sense, rebel given the success they had in phase 1 and seek to be more autonomous in the way in which they do things. This autonomy, as described in this graphic here, is a little bit like a goldfish wanting to jump out of the bowl and get away from the directive orders of others and be more autonomous in what they do. The antidote in dealing with this quest for more autonomy and freedom, if you will, is to delegate. Moving away from the centrality and the systems that were put in place to move the organization through phase 2 to one in which now it's delegated. Delegation has its challenges as well, because delegation means decentralization, and decentralization could mean that activities take place in different geographies or different divisions are in separate locations as the organization grows and matures, and there's specialization, there's segregation, there's some issues of separation between staff and line in different division units. So the success of growth then is challenged by management wanting to have more control over what it has delegated. And so what you have then in a crisis of control is a response to try to create better coordination. The coordination then comes together in a way in which individuals are now communicating with one another. There's better systems. They try to align themselves more directly, and this issue can create meetings and a lot of opportunity to talk and discuss things, and a little bit of bureaucracy begins to show its ugly head, and this creates a crisis in red tape, There are blockades, things slow down, you don't have the autonomy and freedom to move as quickly, you're reporting, and this red tape then creates its own challenge. The antidote, of course, is to collaborate better, but as I indicated, incipient committee meetings and having to get together and collaborate and meet has a challenge of being exhausting at times. Things slow down. Folks can't get things done the way they wanted to, and as a result, weariness sets in and the organization can experience a crisis of saturation. Well, these kinds of challenges take us through an understanding of the entire cycle of growing from a startup to a mature organization that needs to try to reinvent itself at some time when saturation sets in. But for our purposes, we're interested in phases 1 and phases 2 because that's where entrepreneurial activity takes place. And if it is successful, it has to cross what I'm going to call the chasm, has to cross a gap. And lean startup principles, the way in which those were developed that we talked about earlier on, can help us get through the transition from phase 2 to phase 3 in the growth process. Let us look for a moment now how lean practices can help by backing away and focusing on what are the levers or drivers in terms of what management tries to do or how the organization is structured or the different styles and so on. The items down the right-hand side of the chart that must come into play to deal with the evolutions that's necessary at each particular phase. And in this particular chart right here, I just want to remind you of what it is that you're trying to do in phase 1. The focus is making and selling, being very creative, and it's very informal. And it simply means that it's entrepreneurial and individualistic. The control systems is just simply based on market results. And ownership is what's important to management. In phase 2, you're getting more efficient with the operations, centralized and more functional, and the style, as we indicated, is directive. Cost centers may emerge at some point in which one tries to get a handle of their costs so that they can get a better sense of what the margins really are. And to that extent, we're worrying about incentives and merit increases and standard strappings of how to reward individuals in an organizational structure. You can get through phase 1 and phase 2 pretty successfully, but trying to make it to phase 3 creates a real problem because this is where growth accelerates. There's an expansion of markets. There is decentralization or different geographic divisions or different units working autonomously in other different places. And so you have to rely on trust, that there's an alignment because of how you communicate and how the reporting systems work in the different entities that are responsible for delivering results. And incentives that creep in are simply things like bonuses in an effort to try to align what may be going on in the field with the overall results of the enterprise. These three phases are what's really critical in a growing company. But for completeness, I'll just put phase 4, and which involves the coordination effect that I was telling you about earlier, and phase 5, which involves the collaboration, so that you see the full evolution of an organization as matures. But for our purposes, we are focusing on the beginning here, as I've indicated, and we're going to worry then about how you get from the beginning across the chasm into phase 3, where growth can accelerate, and we're going to put these in and gray them out so that I understand that we're not really particularly paying attention to them. So crossing the chasm then is critical to what we're trying to do. And in summary, I want to say that there are these 5 phases: the creativity, the direction, the delegation, coordination, and collaboration throughout the entire cycle of how an organization matures. And each phase, as you evolve, produces a challenge or a crisis that must be met with. For our purposes, Lean thinking principles can help the entrepreneur move quickly through phase 1 and phase 2 and get ready to be successful in phase 3 when markets can expand, that infrastructure can be established, and the organization can put a there behind their ideas, their products, and really what they've discovered about their customer needs. The reality of culture then and how you move from 2 to 3 become critical and must be considered. So how we develop our culture in the organization, the things we stand for, and how we lead and manage and conduct ourselves become essential to making sure that the transition to 3 is alive and successful. We will focus on culture in our next module.